Nathaniel Lee. Thank you for joining our show again today. We got some dramatic news today to talk about in the American economy. With me today, I got a former U.S. Assistant Attorney, Marlon Primes, to talk about some important issues that are affecting our community directly. And we got to dive right into it because it's critical that we talk about this terrible trend that we're seeing in America labor statistic. We woke up this week with the horrifying news that America needs each month in order to make sure we have a job for our national economy, about 150,000 new jobs. And the Trump administration, since they've taken power, new jobs has dramatically declined. This week, we get statistics to say that in the last 3 months, they revised the number way down that we're probably averaging 15 to 16,000 new jobs, which is only about 10% of the jobs necessary to be created to funnel our national economy. But what is most disturbing, I was talking to Marlon earlier today, and the most terrifying statistic about Black women unemployment. Marlon, what did you learn about the Black women unemployment and what's going on?
Hey, good morning, Nathaniel. Certainly good to be with you today. Yes, certainly there's very terrifying and troubling news that over 300,000 African American women have left the workforce. And so that's really troubling for our African American community because there's so many households being led by African American women. So it's certainly problematic because you look at each household, that's someone being able to go off to college, have the needs in order to, matriculate through high school. So it's certainly problematic, in my view.
Well, one of the tendency I noticed recently, we just had the National Bar Convention this week in Chicago, 100 years, and the National Bar was formed because Black lawyers couldn't join the White Bar Association. But one thing I noticed is that in talking to a lot of the lawyers there, there's been a big shift. A lot of them have changed jobs, changed careers, and you see the effect of the attacks on law firm. Uh, Black lawyers, probably a majority of law firm, probably hovers around 2% before the DEI attack. And Marlon, what disturbed me, these major billion-dollar law firm capitulated to Trump, this DEI, and I thought about it. It appears to me that they were happy to do that because if you take one firm that got 1,700 lawyers, they may have about 30 or 40 Black lawyers. Well, they'd be happy with 10, because law firms, what most people don't realize, is probably one of the last profession to desegregate properly. And now we're going in reverse. We're seeing a sharp decline in admission to law schools, and it just doesn't stop there. So this troubling statistic will have an adverse effect on our community. Marlon, in a lot of the households, Black women are the primary breadwinner. How does it affect that community when so many of these professional women are losing their jobs?
Big effect. I mean, a bigger part of the national economy is personal consumption. I think this is just a canary in the coal mine in terms of what you're seeing, not only in terms of Black women, but I think, our overall unemployment rate also went up. And so that has a big impact on hiring overall if there's a view that the economy is not strong. So it's going to have a very adverse impact on our communities. And I think you're right. The law firms were the last bastion in terms of desegregating. You had the first wave of African American attorneys that integrated these firms, perhaps in the 1970s, some a trickle in the 1960s, but mainly in the 1970s. A lot of that was because we had leadership at the top of our country, especially in the late 60s with Lyndon Johnson, indicating that, hey, there has been governmental steps to stop the progress of African Americans. And we need affirmative action to reverse that. So that's why he passed those executive orders, passed landmark civil rights statutes in the 1960s. And that really sent an important message for the government sector to begin opening up their places of employment. And then, slowly but surely, there was a more of a trickle to the private law firms. Now, what's troubling is that we have the reverse of that. We have the current administration, as your listeners may know. One of the first things this president did was he reversed the executive order by Lyndon Baines Johnson regarding affirmative action. And so what that does is it not only sends a message in terms of state, local, federal government, but also sends a message in terms of to our law firms and our private employers. So this is certainly problematic. And I think it's something that our listeners need to be aware of and educate others about.
Well, here's the troubling statistics. In 2018, there was 10.7 million Black women in the workforce. And I couldn't pull the statistic for 2023, but I'm assuming it's around 11 million. So when you lose 315,000, what's that, 3% of the Black women workforce? Now, statistically speaking, we as a people make less money than a white counterpart. Now, when you compound that with the fact now that we have a rapid decline of these professional women in the workforce, it's going to have an adverse effect on the homes in our community. I mean, just think about this. One of the statistics that I talk about all the time is the access to college and advanced education. And folks, you could tell the wealth of any community based upon the number of people with advanced degrees. So if you have a neighborhood and everybody in that neighborhood had, for example, a PhD, JD, MD, they're medical doctors or they have technical degrees, that's probably going to be an upper middle class or higher level of income. If you compare and contrast that to another neighborhood where the average person, say, dropped out of high school, that would probably be an economically depressed area. So when we take away these opportunities, starting with our educational field, it's going to have an adverse effect. Now, combined, and I think, Marlon, one of the biggest disasters we've seen is when we talk about the Black women unemployment. Does it have anything to do with the federal government when they went through and just start firing people or letting people go randomly?
It does, because, and you're going to see another uptick because a lot of those firings were individuals, taking buyouts. And those buyouts, they only get paid to the end of September. So, there's going to be an uptick in terms of the impact on our communities. And then there were people that were just outright fired that did not take advantage of the offer of the administration to retire or leave the workforce now. In exchange, you'll get paid a full salary and benefits to the end of September. There were some people who just walked out of the building and fired outright. And in fact, one of the things that's very disturbing is that there is supposed to be a process to fire a federal employee. It doesn't mean, despite, popular, sentiment that, someone that is incompetent can keep their federal job. That's not true. The only thing that's different from the public sector as opposed to the private sector, the federal government, you have to provide a notice of intent to terminate. You have to explain why you're terminating that individual. You have to give that individual an opportunity to respond and get counsel. Then a third party will make a determination based upon that evidence, whether or not there can be a dismissal or a sanction. And then you have the right to appeal that through the Merit System Protections Board. So what's really troubling is that we're just letting that whole safeguards go by the wayside. And those safeguards were what protected a lot of African American employees from losing their jobs. You had to have a legitimate reason. You had to go back and say, hey, are what you're firing me for, have I been trained about it? Has there been progressive discipline? And so, that's why I think you see people, progressing. You have to have, standards, things of that sort. So for us to kind of move away from that, that's certainly going to be problematic, not only in terms of, Black people, being employed, but also, moving through the system and supervisory jobs, and that can make them accessible to jobs in the private sector. So it's very, very troubling. And I think what really concerns me, Nathaniel, is that we're spending so much time as a national media and even as a community on ancillary things, at least in my view, and not really talking about these important issues. You're not seeing that in the major news media. They're talking about Epstein and other things, but they're not really talking about bread and butter issues about how people maintain themselves. These jobs are important because we went through a foreclosure crisis that really hit the African American community hard. So if you have all these people being laid off or fired or leaving the workforce, then that's going to be less people that are going to be able to pay a mortgage. And that's going to, be disastrous for, many of our communities, because many of us, through discrimination and redlining, live in communities where other African Americans reside. So it's going to have a number of ripple effects. And then you use property taxes to fund your schools. So if, people aren't able to have a job and contribute, it's going to be less likely for them to maintain a house, support a school system, and support our communities. And then we use that money to support our African American institutions. The strongest institution in the Black community is a church. So that's funded by what? Tithes. So, in a lot of these churches, I know you're active in your church, I am in mine, but they have outstanding ministries in terms of the homeless, in terms of giving scholarships. So if people don't have jobs, they're going to be less likely to be able to contribute to those very important functions.
Well, what I'm most disappointed in at this juncture is a lack of a response to these travesty that we're seeing unfolding. We're focusing on these esoteric issues. Jeffrey Epstein has been popular in the news because it seemed like he was one of the current president, close friend and buddy. And obviously that's important, but the problem is it ignored the terrible policies that they're putting in place to reduce our ability to earn a good living in this country. They're foreclosing the opportunity for us to have the best college education. They're restricting our rights in terms of being able to have equal access. And I'm concerned too, first about the federal government, Marlon. What I don't understand, I saw where the president got a negative labor statistic, and these people are neutral. And so the first thing he did is fired the person giving these statistics. So now he's going to put a like in there that gives you false information from something that we rely on in this country. But the core of this, all these Black women that are losing their jobs, and that's got to cause a lot of human suffering in our community. That's 3% of the workforce of Black women in the United States, about 3%. I mean, but that 3% probably affect maybe 15% of the people in the country. Like what you said, churches get tied and things like that. And then what is our current plan of action to deal with this? I've not seen one. Am I missing something?
And that's the thing that's just really troubling. And that's why there is so much anger, in the African American community, because there was just a feeling, Nathaniel, that nobody came to our defense. I mean, there was just an existential threat against us in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if you compare that to the outrage regarding Epstein, and that's bad, there shouldn't be anyone that is having relations with individuals that are underage. That's certainly inappropriate. But there should be an equal groundswell when they're cutting off the opportunity for us to go to college and get an education. That's what transformed African American communities. Most of us had parents that were blue collar workers, and now we are practicing law. We have individuals that are practicing medicine and dentistry. And that's because they had, opportunities to work in these jobs. And then they were able to pass on those benefits to ensure that we got a good education. So it's a clear and present danger. And it's just really troubling that we haven't seen the groundswell of just moral outrage in terms of what's being done. The thing that's really kind of troubling, Nathaniel, is that the current administration has really doubled down on this concept of illegal. It's illegal to teach diversity, equity, and inclusion, and no one's really even challenged them, at least not in a public way. I mean, obviously, there's been a number of court cases, but you have to ask the basic question: hey, how do you distinguish between what is allegedly improper DEI and proper DEI? And they haven't defined it. That's why you see, school districts banning Ruby Bridges' book, or the Defense Department taking down Jackie Robinson's information online because it hasn't been defined, and we've let them get away with that. And finally, I think we need to really hold not only these law firms to task that did not fight, and they had very winnable lawsuits. But we also really need to take these schools to task, because this has been the ladder of opportunity for our people. Look at the settlement that Columbia University recently had with this administration, followed by just a few days ago, Brown University had an agreement with the administration, and then University of Pennsylvania. These are schools that were on the front lines in terms of, hey, we're going to open our doors to let African Americans and people of color in. And what they did that's really critical, and I think your listeners really need to focus in on this, is they really took the bait in terms of this administration as it relates to what it means to be qualified. And if you look at a lot of this litigation, the affirmative action litigation, the University of Michigan case, the Texas case that came to the Supreme Court some years ago, the fundamental argument from the conservative movement was that, I can just look at someone's grade point average and standardized test score. And if you don't reach a certain level, then you're automatically less qualified. And you and I know that's, further from the truth, because you're evaluating somebody when they're in ninth grade, 14 years old. They might have a parent that's sick. They might change schools, and a parent might be divorced, or they just may not get it at that particular time, but they get it subsequently. And then there's always been a correlation between these standardized tests and not being an accurate predictor of the success of many people of color for a variety of reasons. So what Brown did and what Columbia did is they said that they're going to give all the data regarding who's admitted based upon what grade point average and standardized test scores to the administration in the future to look at. And then they have a monitor. So if they look at it just from the basis of GPA and standardized test score, it's going to have a disparate impact. And then coupled with the fact that you have the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice being transformed to really try to litigate cases in favor of aggrieved white people that say that, hey, they've been discriminated against. So someone that doesn't get into a school can say, hey, I had a higher GPA or standardized test score, and the Department of Justice is investigating these institutions. So those are things that I think we need to really be talking about. Those are things that I think we need to have a plan about, in my view. And I think it's important to talk about, the Epstein issues. I get that, but that should not be the main headline. It should be, hey, they're cutting the ladder out from under us, the ladder that you and I and your wife, and my wife used to be successful. Education. They're cutting that opportunity for those who follow behind us.
Well, what we're seeing in real time we're seeing a collapse of our national economy. We're seeing a steady but slow increase in unemployment. When the current president inherited this economy, it was hitting on all cylinders. We had growth. There was a lot of economic indicator we were headed in the right direction. The introduction of tariffs had been detrimental to our economy. I was looking at a Ford financial report, Ford Motor Company, and they've sold a similar number of vehicles, but their profit went down to almost nothing. Why? Because they're paying tariffs, not because their cars are manufactured in a foreign country, but parts are. And so this tariff that we're seeing collected will essentially resonate and be at your local grocery stores and place where you shop. Tariff is a tax on American consumers. Ultimately, you will pay the price for that. And for the first time that I've ever seen, Marlon, is that they've given one person the authority to impose these taxes without approval of Congress. It's almost like we don't have the system of checks and balances that I grew up learning about government. But in any event, we have a call on the line. Call, you have a question or comment for us today. Go ahead.
This is Pierre.
Morning, Pierre. How are you doing?
Oh, good morning, Nate and Attorney Crimes. I just wanted to reflect on my situation 20 some odd years ago when I got fired from the federal government on my 365th day, something that they're not supposed to do. But I recall having to go through the looking at the rules of the Office of Personnel Management and the Office of Special Counsel. It seems to me with these federal workers, are those agencies not working? Or are they, it seems like there's a Fifth Amendment problem here with due process rights with these workers getting fired. Is that Office of Personnel Management, have they stopped investigating cases?
Well, yeah, the problem is that one of the things the administration did is that they've let go a lot of the watchdogs, including the Office of Special Counsel. The Office of Special Counsel investigates issues of, firing employees for partisan political reasons, because the whole reform movement with the Pendleton Act that was passed in the 1800s and then the Civil Service Reform Act in 1978 is that we don't, as a policy, it's not good for society to have people exclusively fired for political reasons unless they're a political appointee. So that's what the special counsel is supposed to investigate. But, right now, you had the administration firing someone in that position. And there's some concern in terms of the other agencies, whether it be the National Labor Relations Board that investigates issues in terms of those that are unionized or attempting to be unionized. You have a problem in terms of filling vacancies on the Merit System Protection Board, so individuals can appeal their cases. And so the problem is that, even in, good times, there's been a large backlog. And so it takes a while for these cases to litigate themselves, to work through the system. Now, on top of an already slow system, you have, bodies that are not at full capacity. So that makes it even worse. So the problem is that, you could file a claim and it could take, years to get relief. And so what do you do in the meantime in terms of eating and feeding your family? So it's certainly problematic.
And I'm glad you brought up the National Labor Relations Board. As you know, Nate, here in town, we've got Region 28, I believe, and I filed a number of labor practice violations against my employer. And quite frankly, I haven't heard from one of the officers that took my complaint. And so I'm wondering if he got fired or if he's not there anymore. And I've been pretty active on those unfair labor practices. This is a gutting of the federal workforce and protections. And I'm like, where are these law firms? And one other thing I'll say to you, Primes, and Nate, and Nate, I mentioned it to you at the Black Expo. I've got another case rolling in federal court. Won't belabor the point, but the point is, some of these courts are out of control. I accused 2 federal judges of violating my Fifth Amendment rights, and nothing happened to me. And the judges didn't call me on the carpet. And some of these law firms working with these courts, I believe we got litigation rackets going on in some of these courts across the country and here in town. So keep an eye on Pullins versus EchoBot, ECOBAT, formerly RSR Cameco. Keep an eye on those cases. We are living in a time where we're watching the federal government and our courts just be dismantled by corporate interests. And we're in a scary time. So just keep an eye on those things. And thank you for taking my call.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go to the next caller. Amatep, you have a question or comment for us today, sir? Go ahead.
Hello, Brother Nate. Brother Nate, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, sir. Go ahead.
All right, good morning to everyone. And I was a federal employee at once too in the VA system. And now being a healthcare professional, I always get that question asked, have you ever had any problems with the OIG, and are you on a list? And no, of course not. You don't want to be on the OIG list, unless you were Trump, because he had Lawrence Taylor convicted. And I met Lawrence Taylor years ago on the golf course down in Florida, a place called Turnberry Resort. Very nice resort. And he had Lawrence Taylor up there, convicted sex offender, announcing that he's going to work with children and youth sports. I didn't think under federal law, you were a convicted sex offender, you could be anywhere around kids. I've been coaching for 25 years, and we always have to fill out background check forms, and they specifically look if you've had any issues with children. Has that legal standard left, Nate? Is that? I don't want to beat up on Lawrence Taylor, but the facts are the facts. How can you have a conviction for doing something improper with children and pass a background check to work with children?
I have no idea. Maybe Marlon can. I don't know.
And then the second thing is that the Supreme Court yesterday decided to hear the case in Louisiana challenging the redistricting to create majority black districts under the 14th and 15th Amendment. I'm sure you guys probably heard of that, and I'd like to hear your opinions on that. Louisiana it's a big fight going on down there, and I pay attention to Greg, I think it's Greg Owens or Greg, one of the congressmen down there, but listen to a lot of things going down there. But it seems to be now that they said that they're going to go ahead and listen to read those briefs and arguments. What are we looking at down there? What are we looking at? And then we see what's going on in Texas, and I think Gavin Newsom said they'll do the same thing in California. It's just crazy, but I'll listen to your answers off the air. Thank you for taking my call.
Yeah. I heard a really interesting presentation by Barbara Online, who used to lead up the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, and now is leading a group, Transformative Justice. And she, expressed a lot of alarm about these cases. Without getting too esoteric, what my understanding, according to Attorney Arwan, is that there's an attempt to say that there's not an individual right of action in terms of a violation of the voting rights, and that could limit the people that are able to sue for a violation of the Voting Rights Act, and so that can have a disastrous impact. because, if we're just relying upon, the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division or state entities to do it, certainly that's going to, impact these important rights. The Voting Rights Act was one of the key, pieces of legislation that was responsible for just transforming our society. Because let's just call it for what it is. We had an apartheid system before the 1960s legislation was passed. The 1964 Civil Rights Act, the 1965 Voting Rights Act, the Housing Act. Those radically transformed our society. So we have to really be concerned about any attempts to dilute that, because those are important in terms of, giving us the right to vote and right of representation. What's very important as well is that there is an attempt in Texas, and also there's rumors that it's going to happen in Ohio, where they're going to try to these conservative legislatures are going to try to change the voting map to make it more difficult for those that are progressive to get elected, and make it easier for more conservatives to get elected and keep the majority in Congress. And that's very important, because as long as there is a majority in the House of Representatives, as long as there's a majority in the Senate, the upper chamber, then there can't be any investigations of the president. There can't be any hearings, things of that sort. So there's really been a full press to make sure that there's, single party rule in terms of the White House, in terms of the House, in terms of the Senate. So it's something that we really need to educate people on. And we need to really make sure that people, not only talk about the issues and not only protest, but making sure they're registered to vote, and they check to see, hey, are they redistricting a new district? Is there a new voting place? All those things are very important. I think, that's something that we can do in terms of concrete to address some of the issues that are going on that many of us are very concerned about.
Well, Marlon, what I think most people have forgotten about is the history of America. When you said that maybe you alluded to the fact that we had an apartheid system. In my school district, the first time that I was impacted was in 1969. In 1969, as part of the desegregation, Brown versus Board of Education was a 1954 decision, but I was being transferred to desegregate the white school in my community, Polka High School, in 1969. And so I think people have rapidly forgotten about the fact that this institution of segregation, so our schools are segregated almost around up until about 1970. So that busing and the desegregation, 1969. Think about that. So we're not that far removed from segregated schools, about 55 years or so. And that's not a long time. And the reason that's important, when we had segregated schools, we got the older textbooks, we had less funding, our facilities didn't have the money put into our facility for our schools. And it was a whole list of things that made our experience more difficult, in the sense that it was a lack of equal financing of the school system. So now we're seeing an America that's going in reverse at a rapid pace, and the sales pitch is ludicrous. You see this openly attacked on DEI, affirmative action, things like that, and everybody forget about our sordid past. And when I see the statistics today of over 300,000 Black women lose their job in the last 3-4 months, it's shocking as to how this is impacting our community. Marlon, what occurs now? We got 3% of Black women workforce, but what happened when they get 10%? Are we going? And I don't think it's going to stop. I think it's going to continue to increase and escalate. I think that we have to come up with a plan to attack this. Not just voting, but I think now is the time that we look at these issues a little bit more seriously. Like, for example, uh, what about targeting a certain corporation? They had a successful boycott of Target, but I don't think they went far enough. I mean, we have to look at corporation, we have to look at government. Now, of course, we have to get out and vote in the midterms like we never voted before. But before that, I think we have to have some type of activism, peaceful protests, and things like that to try to eradicate this rapid decline.
Yeah, I think the main thing, Nathaniel, is just really, making sure that people are informed. I mean, our people are just really catching it on all ends. When you're losing your job or fearful of you're losing your job, I mean, you're not going to be as attuned to really hearing what's in the media and hearing about, some of the things that we're talking about today. So I think it's really important for each and every one of us that has the time, that are knowledgeable about these issues, that we're sharing this information with other people so that they can make informed decisions about who they're voting for. So I think that's the first thing. I'm very, very concerned on that front, that there's been kind of not been kind of, but there's been certainly a limitations as relates to information getting out. National Public Radio, they did a wonderful and have done a wonderful job getting information out, making people aware of various issues. And, this administration basically clawed back almost $1 billion in the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which doles out money to these local rural radio stations that provide information so people can stay informed. It's going to have a disastrous impact. We're thinking that some of these smaller stations, may go dark. So, making people aware of issues like that and how they can be an existential threat, because we don't want people just to exclusively rely upon Fox News, because a lot of the information is just inaccurate. So I think that's the first thing we have to do, is making sure that, there's not this echo chamber from just Fox News, but people are really understanding the true issues, whether it's the Voting Rights Act, whether it's the issue of African-American females, unemployment. These are important issues that our community needs to be made aware of. And then I think the other thing too is we have to really be vocal to our elected representatives, that we want them to do more. If you have to shut down something or say you're not going to, confirm people, then so be it. But I think, we're going to have to, be more vocal and in turn let our representatives know that they need to be more vocal as well.
Well, the one thing that I think that we have to do right away, we have to become more aware of the adverse effect of these policies having in our community. The things when the women in the workforce are losing their job today, and I surmise that a lot of these folks go on unemployment benefits, and that has a short window of opportunity, but the unemployment benefits will not equal their compensation that they previously enjoyed. And by the way, does the federal workers have the same unemployment benefits as the state actors, Marlon?
Yes, you can get unemployment, but the problem is it's a small fraction. So, you might get, 400 hours a week. And, if you have a mortgage to pay, or if you're paying school tuition or you're trying to raise a child, that could be problematic. So, again, this is just the issues that we need to make people aware of, and people need to, inform those that are unaware. I mean, you still have, I think that people should vote for whoever they want, but you should know why you're voting for them. There's still a number of people that look like you and I that, will swear up and down that, hey, this administration isn't doing all these things, so that they're not having an adverse impact on the African Americans. So there's some people that you can't reach. No matter what you say, it's not going to make any difference. But I think there are a lot of people that just don't know and don't have the time. So if we're working and through our networks, communicating with people, I think is the first line of defense. I think the other thing that we need to really kind of look at in terms of just next steps are those that have the resources, funding some of these institutions that are filing suit. The American Bar Association's filed suit, as a result of some of the overreach of the administration. The NAACP has filed suit. So, if you, see these organizations that are on the front lines and protecting our rights, then I think, and if you're in the position to donate, I think you should do so.
Well, our listeners are coming up with some great ideas. I appreciate their sending the text to us about these ideas from, and it seems like the theme that I'm seeing is that they're saying that we need to support Black businesses, but that doesn't go far enough. I think that we have to create more of these businesses models and one of the problems we have is that we do not have a sufficient number of African Americans involved in the manufacturing process. We tend to be in the distribution, but not the manufacturing aspect of it. And so you have to come up with processes where you start making stuff, and when you start manufacturing goods, it creates a whole level of activities. You have transportation, you have distributions, and so on and so forth. So you create more jobs. So I think that's one of the things. But the problem that exists, Marlon, is the lack of access to capital. So you can't all of a sudden start a factory on the fact that you want to. You have to have a lot of money up front to fund the venture in advance. And what we're lacking at is that we don't have the access to capital in our community a lot of time to fund these. Right now, we see a national economy that's becoming more and more reliance upon technology. So whether it's chips or hard drives or whatever it is, now AI, artificial intelligence, is the rule of the day. And in these sectors, we have to become more actively involved because in my law firm, for example, we're now able to do, in terms of brief writing and things like that, we're able to do it 4 times as fast because of the technology. And so what I'm concerned about is that not only do we have a problem of surviving today, but in the future, we have to start looking at opportunities that will be available in the future. And so when I look at the large number of Black women that are leaving the workforce this year, I got to think that we got to start looking forward to future years and say, what will the national economy look like, say 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road? And then we have to be prepared to meet the challenge in that decade.
Yeah, I think you're right. And let me just kind of circle back and just put a double, triple X on the issue of just, supporting Black businesses and supporting our own. And I think you really hit the nugget of the issue is that we have so many talented people in our community that have great ideas, but just don't have access to capital. So I think what, individual listeners can do on an individual level to make a difference is supporting Black banks, Black credit unions. They're certainly not as many as there should be, but there are Black credit unions and Black banks in Indiana, they're in Ohio, supporting them. And in fact, I'll tell you a story. The church that I was a member of, there were a group of African-American parishioners that got together in the 1940s because African Americans could not get loans at majority banks. And they got together and they formed Antioch Credit Union. And this was a lifesaver. This, changed lives. Someone wanted to get, they go down to a bank and a majority bank, and they're denied for no good reason. Because before that time, in the 40s, there was no federal legislation that was present that prohibited discrimination or redlining. But the problem with a lot of these, credit unions, a lot of them, I did volunteer legal work for the Antioch Credit Union for 30 years. The problem is that, we're not having as many people support the Antioch Credit Union and other credit unions around the country. So if you have a credit union at your church or in your local community, you can make an appreciable difference by, putting some money in there, maybe taking out a loan. I mean, because that's where they get a lot of their income from. Instead of getting a line of credit, through Chase, seeing if you get a line of credit from one of these credit unions, because that can help as well. And then just generally supporting Black businesses. My wife's a Black business owner. We have so many talented people that do so many different things. I know there's like Black pages in Indiana and also in Ohio, getting those, subscribing to those, and using Black professionals for your needs.
Well, I think that's certainly important, particular now, because we do have a substantial amount of wealth in our community, but that money doesn't stay in our community. Sadly, the money that we're earning is spent outside of our community, and net result is we don't have the benefit. And not a knock on anyone, because you're free to spend your money wherever you want to, but I think in a global sense you have to be more conscientious, just like voting, for example. Marla, I've had these debates along the voting line with people, for example, who supported Trump, and what's amazing to me is that when I discuss issue with them, how sadly misinformed they are. And I was talking to one person, it's kind of bothered me. I'm thinking, where do you get that statistic from? And they're getting their statistics from TikTok and places like that. I say, so you're getting your information from Russians and Chinese? Is that what you're saying? You're in America, so you rely on information from foreign government to tell you about what's going on in the United States of America. Do you think that's a good idea? And so part of the problem we're dealing with in terms of trying to deal with these problems of today, we gotta do a better job of communicating what's important to our community. Like, I thought that the Biden administration, Joe Biden came to the National Bar Convention this week, and I was talking to Cedric Richmond about that. And it was sadly how misinformed a lot of folks are. Like, for example, if you went out and got medication now under this Biden bill, I mean, you almost pay nothing for medication. At least I don't now, because of this Inflation Reduction Act. And, when you ride on I-65 and places like that, you see all these improvement in the roadway. Well, that was part of the Build Back Better America plan. So you see all these things that has occurred, but they did not properly, I felt, communicate these great accomplishments. I mean, coupled the fact that we had more Black judges appointed under Biden than everybody else combined in American history. He did a tremendous job, particularly for our community. And, the economy was great. Unemployment was low. It came in and fixed a sick America. We were dealing with COVID when people were still dying. We had a president at the time when COVID hit, thought that it'd be over with by the summer. And we know how that turned out.
Correct.
And it kept going on, or he thought it would be cured by putting bleach in your system, crazy stuff. And so, but what we have to deal with now is a society, Martin, that's governed by misinformation. I was watching some of the news story, and every now and then I do look at Fox to get what the entertainment on their station is, because it's not news, it's entertainment. And I try to get an understanding of what their issues they're creating. And they were all upset about this Jeffrey Epstein's issue, Marlon. And I just couldn't get the obsession with this issue. It's like the holy grail of conservatism is they preach that, I guess, Democrats, a bunch of pedophiles that raping young girls and stuff. I'm not sure where they thought that was occurring. And now they find out one of their own is a ringleader, and they're so upset about it. And I was just stunned by watching that and seeing the gravity of the mistrust and anger that they're mad about. It was just crazy stuff.
Yeah, and I think Pierre, in the chat, made a, good point, and that goes to the issue that you discussed, Nathaniel, is that when I started practicing, there was no satellite radio, and there was just, old radio, and you had these, outrageous talk shows that were on, and people like Rush Limbaugh, and then you had Sean Hannity, and they became national. And a lot of these individuals in Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity, they don't even have college degrees, but they're spewing out a lot of information that is incorrect. And then, as Pierre rightly points out, there's a whole network of local radio stations that, sing from the same choir to just put out disinformation, disinformation, disinformation. And then your listeners need to be aware of, of what's known as the QAnon movement. And, it's a very conservative movement. They believe in conspiracy theories. And that's in some ways become mainstream now. And part of their edict is, believing what you said about that, there's a lot of pedophiles and things of that sort. And it involves a Democratic Party. And a lot of the information that's being put out is just blatant misinformation. And the final thing I'll leave with you is that one of the keys to any totalitarian administration, it doesn't happen overnight. Democracies don't die overnight, they die in stages. So if you look at what happened in Hungary, one of the first things that Viktor Orban did is, taking over the media or having influence on the media. And we're seeing figments of that today in that we're limiting access to public radio that's educating people. And a number of our local stations are going under. And so there's a really limit. So the only alternative for people getting information is going on TikTok or going on Fox News. So as a consequence, you have people that have preconceived notions that are really, hard to kind of get them off those notions, even if you have real facts, because now they'll just say, hey, that's fake news, and they'll just shut down. So it's certainly problematic. So I think the Democrats need to do the progressive movement needs to do a lot better job in terms of getting their information out, whether it's through YouTube, social media, podcasts, so people aren't misinformed.
Yeah. Okay, Imhotep, you have a question or comment for us?
Real fast, Nate. I want to throw something I think was vitally important. I've always read and listen to Jeffrey Sachs, Paul, Nobel Prize winning economist, Paul, I can't remember Paul's last name. Anyway, Robert Reich, former labor secretary. And we see last month that the unemployment rate, we saw the bad job numbers, and I know you all dealt with that with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. But what's deeper than that is Robert Reich, Jeffrey Sachs talks about you have unemployment, and you have real unemployment. Okay, unemployment ticked up for black people. Of course, that's probably what a lot of black women in the government losing their jobs. Black men lost 160,000 jobs. That's not talked about either. So we ticked up to like 7.2%. But real unemployment, that's people who are underemployed or people who have been looking for work. I think it's over 90 days or 6 months and can't find work, or underemployment that's under, I think, 36 hours a week. Real unemployment for white men is 25%. Real unemployment for black men is 32%. So Trump doesn't want people really compiling proper numbers, because when you really go and look at the fundamentals underneath, it's really worse than what they've been talking about. And so with Ford coming out talking about they lost $1 billion last quarter now, he doesn't want to hear that. General Motors announced they lost $1 billion. We're hearing now from Nike and what they're going to do. We just saw Procter & Gamble say they're going to raise prices. These corporations gave him money and put him in office with his tax cut. So how is this tax cut balancing out these major losses with the corporations now? Because we know that 90% of the workers are going to suffer, and the 10%, the board and everything like that's going to be insulated. But how did they think that this wasn't going to help make the companies suffer and cause these problems by supporting them in the first place just because of a stupid tax cut? Thanks for taking my call.
Well, I don't know. We have, I see our calls also, or putting information in a chat box, and they've got a lot of activism today with a lot of important issues. But I tell you what, I'm going to leave this with everyone today, because this is important. If you're upset about the direction of the country, in a democracy, what little of it that still exists, the only way you could curb the adverse effect is that you have to vote like you never voted before, and you have to call 10 of your friends, your neighbors, make sure they vote. And what we have to do differently is that our goal is try to get 100% of people in our community to vote. Not 90, not 80, try to get everybody. So the people that's on the corner, we have to go one step further this time. We have to work harder to fight for democracy. All the games that were made from the 60s and with the blood, the murders and the assassination and all the things that happened to us, they're trying to do a reversal. It's almost like we are erasing historical data to show what happened to us in this country, and they're making it seem like that's okay. But in any event, Marlon, what I was concerned about too, one last thing, is that police shooting and things like that, it seemed like to me that there was some effort to get rid of that data also.
Yeah, that's certainly problematic because, not only in order, if we don't understand the problem, then how can you remedy it? And you have individuals thinking that, hey, we just want to be colorblind and, we're not going to look at these statistics. That will put us, substantially backward, not only as relates to police misconduct, but a whole slew of things. We were brought to this country as slaves, and we should be measuring, how we're treated and how we're progressing in the society. And so to act as though, hey, there's no disparities, as Ketanji Brown Jackson, pointed out, is tomfoolery. And if we're going to get past discrimination, we have to look at it, we have to examine it, and we have to try to remedy it. It's not going to dissipate by itself, without doing the hard work of educating people and understanding the impact of various policies may have.
Well, thank you everyone for listening to our show. Thank you all your callers that called in. And join us next Saturday. We're doing another legal issue of the day. And Marlon, thank you so much for your excellent comments today. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye now.